So now
Yeah.
let us go on to our new favorite segment.
Hmm.
New Yorker criticize our question mark? I don't know. We need to come up with a title. I don't got nothing on. So you got a suggestion for what we would call it?
No, not at the moment. I'm kind of, I mean, prosaically, we can say,
The glossy pages. Looking through the glossy
depressing
pages.
ass literature from a snotty magazine.
God.
But
Okay, so
I love the New Yorker. I'm teasing.
yeah, no, they're just so good, but they definitely have a style. Like reading these stories, you realize it's very controlled, it's very tight, it's very
No, I didn't think this story was tight at all. I
okay.
loved it for that.
Okay,
I thought
well,
it was covered in fat,
let me yeah, well, we'll get into that. I have a little
the way that a
synopsis.
ribeye is, I suppose. But
So I didn't think I'd. God damn it, Tan, buddy.
leave this in too. Leave it in. I hope you leave it in. This is funny. This is a
It's
crap fun.
really annoying.
Daryl, listeners, Daryl is a family man. He's got a baby. He's got a wife. He's got a dog. Don't shoot us. Please don't be upset because he's got.
And he's just
Yeah,
staring at me like, Daryl,
buddy,
aren't you gonna protect the house? Like, what are you doing sitting there?
what is she? 4 pounds? If
he
she's a
he's
pound?
he has a guard dog personality. We took him to the trainer because he doesn't really play with other dogs, and when people come around, he kind of goes up to Aurora and protects like us, right? And he's like a little
He's got
poodle.
stature dysphoria. He thinks he's a Rottweiler, but actually he's a lab.
Yeah, hold on. Let me try to close the door a little bit. So this, uh, man, God, my life is annoying sometimes. Okay, so I have a little synopsis that I wrote up about the story. I didn't think I'd like the story, but then I did until I didn't. Two Nurses
Ooh.
Smoking by David Means is the story of two trauma-riddled nurses falling in love during smoke breaks
Mhm.
behind the hospital. She, Gracie, a sexually abused nurse who travels around with the kidney pounder, a machine that breaks up kidney stones, to various hospitals in New York. He, Marlon, a vet of the Iraq War, scarred physically and emotionally, who works as a nurse at the hospital. They smoke and they share stories, initially about the serial killing nurse, but then about their patients, but ultimately about their lives, and their bond grows. No, wait. It's about memory and one searching of it for the point where love begins. And with Gracie and Marlon, it's finding relationship in their loneliness. A loneliness forged by the scalding irons of abuse, trauma, a transitory childhood, poverty, and pain. In this segment of the New Yorker snooty paper, I think this here is probably the loneliest road in America. Two nurses smoking.
Yeah, baby. Very
What
nice.
what'd you think?
Interestingly, Marlon, yeah, the only just to keep the symmetry motif
Mm.
that you had in your I would mention that Marlon, I believe, is a Shoshone.
Yes, he's. Oh, I
He's,
did forget that. Yeah, he's.
I think he's sangre puro too. I think he's actually. I didn't get the impression that he was mixed race. I got the impression he was actually fully Shoshone,
He grew up on a reservation, right?
right near
Uh,
Eli,
yeah.
this town out there in the
Mm.
middle of nowhere, Nevada, I guess.
So what did you think?
So
Initial impressions of the story.
my initial impression was who's narrating.
I thought that
Um,
too. Yeah.
I didn't know. It's interesting that the narrator. There's a time when it's third person throughout, except when the narrator tries to get inside the head of a particular character who speaks, and then there's
Mm.
I think this, comma, she said. Okay, so it's still third person, even though you're using I.
Yeah.
But then there was a segment where I was used exclusively, and then I'm like, okay, so who's saying this? And it wasn't immediately apparent who it was. But while this may not be an important feature for the story, nonetheless, it's a little disorienting. I don't know. I guess you have to kind of surrender to the logic of the narration and
Hmm.
just accept the fact that this is somebody. This could be the writer talking. This could be an avatar that the writer
Hmm.
created who's not necessarily a character in the story. but I found that a little disorienting. But
As did
and
I.
but
They
but
say
I
in the first paragraph they refer to you twice. They're the narrator is speaking directly to us. You would see them doing this. You would see them doing that. It's
from a passing car,
yeah. It's a
I'm
little
like that threw me
odd.
off too. So,
Yeah. Um. Originally, I didn't
hmm,
like it. I wasn't. I didn't think I was going to like it because of the way it's set up. It's so unorthodox, right? Like
yeah,
the start of each paragraph is, and I didn't realize that at first. It took me a little while to catch that the section headings are the starting of the sentence,
right. Because the starting of the sentence is capitalized.
and
It shouldn't be.
it's put
You know,
off above
it's put
the
off.
whole,
There's a space and a new line.
which is started with a capital, and it takes a little while to realize, oh, that's part of the sentence that I'm supposed to be reading.
Yeah, it seemed to me unnecessarily postmodern. I didn't know why. I didn't know why that was necessary. But again, it's David Means's. It's what he needed apparently to get the story out. So I'm not necessarily criticizing. It's just again, it's disorienting. I
Well,
don't know why it's there.
David
After
Means
two
said
reads, I don't know why he did that.
he said it was necessary for him. He said it what's made it work,
I'm
and
sure. I'm sure it did. I'm sure
yeah,
it did.
and he said
I'm
it.
sure it did. And I don't,
Mm,
I feel that I'm in the hands of a very capable writer. So
yeah,
all these, all these structural and all these structural, uh, what do you call, what's the word? Eccentricities.
mm,
I just figured that it's what he needed to do it. I didn't, but it's, like it's you want all your attention to be on the story. You don't want your attention to be spread out trying to figure out who's talking and
yeah.
how he or she knows so much, why I is being used here without any third person qualifier later on,
You definitely don't
why
want
this
it.
subject.
You're
But
the,
if David Means had to do that to get the story out, then fine.
yeah.
You know why? I think, it parallels the characters don't understand what's going on.
Mm,
They're dear listeners, death and misery are interwoven. So you'd figure this is a story as old as the human heart. It's two people trying to become one. And they're not even aware for most of the
that's a
interaction that
good
they're
way to
trying
put
to
it.
become, but they are. So the author has chosen a rather unique way to express this ancient story, this primordial and
Mm,
aboriginal story to human life, and these guys of these two nurses united by profession and trauma. But they are not. Their trauma is a very interesting condition in the human brain where it shortens your time horizon. You are fixed not to the present moment, but to trauma, the past, which manifests itself as past, present, and future at will without your consent. It disorients you as the subject. You, all of a sudden, you may look down and see the woman whom you are making love to. She starts to play with herself because that's how she feels comfortable coming off. Even though you're bringing her off, she still feels comfortable guiding her, because people who are traumatized want to be in control. They feel very uncomfortable if they don't perceive to have control of the situation. So even though Marlon was bringing her off, she still lowered her hand to play with herself and finish it. So her hand seemed to crimp arthritically, brought him to Fallujah, where he shot an arthritic grandmother who came around the corner suddenly. This is what I mean about trauma flattening
mm-hmm.
your trauma, reducing your time horizon. He is in the moment of consummation with a woman he feels very strongly for, and he's brought back to Iraq. And it's I could only understand the narrative style at the second read through that okay, the narration is trying to match the disorientation of trauma.
That's
It's
interesting.
trying to, but you don't know that. So, but if you surrender to the experience and,
Mm.
you can get through it until it starts to make some kind of sense to you. But that's what I love about the story is that there's so much fat. There's so much, it's not polished. It's, in fact, at times I'm like, why does this guy need so many fucking commas? Like, what's going on here?
I think that might be a New Yorker thing. That New Yorker loves their commas. I noticed that too. But
Mm.
it's yeah.
But it's brilliant. It's a beautiful story.
Mm.
It's so empathetic. Like,
It's really
you feel sorry for everyone because
yeah.
ultimately you feel sorry for yourself being in this life that where, for instance, there's as Daryl mentioned early on in his synopsis, they got to know each other outside of a hospital somewhere in New York State where this roving kidney stone
Mm.
clinic would be set up. And she was a nurse attached to that clinic, the trailer, and he was at that particular hospital. And as they're talking, as they're communing, as they're commiserating, and having a tentatively good time, all of a sudden an ambulance will rush up with this
Yeah.
body so destroyed that if they clunk it down to the pavement, the patient would die. So they had to 3, 2, 1, the
Mm.
gurney down to and they both know what that means. And then they see a puff of, this is the most horrid detail,
Yeah.
is that puff of smoke as a blind, pellucid, blood-covered stillbirth is cremated.
It's like a specter. Yeah.
Wow.
Rising. It's great.
And it's just, oh my God, when you have a story that can make you break out in a panic sweat, that's a story, all right.
Yeah.
Kudos, Dave. Means I hope I write as good as you someday, man.
Yeah.
That's wow.
It's funny. I
Oh,
like the fact
that's
too.
the sympathy, to
Mm.
the empathy, the empathetic understanding that life and death
Mm.
are the same with different manifestations, and they happen at the same fucking time in the same place.
The
And
knowledge, like
it's
I really believed. Uh, what's her name? Gracie.
Gracie,
The in
poor
depthness.
Gracie,
Poor Gracie.
poor Marlon,
Both of
both
them.
of them. Sorry, I
Yeah.
interrupted you.
No, 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 no. Go right ahead. I
No, no,
just
no.
I I've read the story twice, and it took me the first time reading it, the after being put off by the format, which is a weird thing to be put off by, but I fell right into it. I just
Mm.
fell right into it, and I liked the segments. I liked being able to see the different aspects as like on their own. I would go back and read specific ones, and I'm like, oh, does this one need to be here? A male patient would come into the trailer bitching and moaning and use the occasion to touch her knee. A woman would come in. Like, is that, like, if you wanted to par this story down to its bare necessities that it needs to be a story, would you need that? I don't know. Right? Like, there's a
No.
couple of those, but they give it this space to breathe a little bit. It gives you this to believe them more, and to the part that I didn't really care for was the no weights. I had a hard time
Well,
with
again, they
that.
don't know. You know,
Mm.
they don't know.
Mm.
They don't know when love began.
Yeah.
They don't know when the journey to that motel began, where
No.
they consummated their passion.
Mm.
They don't know. No, not even the narrator. And it's
Yeah.
again, it's that disorientation of trauma. He, anyone who suffers from an event so painful that it shut down their central nervous system and rerouted vital pathways in the brain.
Mm.
Anyone who's been through an experience like that, it is all over you all the time, and there's no escaping it.
Mm.
There's only the analgesic of distraction and hard work, or facing it head on for an extended period of time, and either with meditation, voluminous tears, community support, drugs, or all four, only then are you able to route your brain differently to such an extent that those old pathways become either redundant or relegated to side streets. That's the only way, and neither of them have the means to do so. They're working in professions that demand all of their time. And interestingly enough, there's only 2 times that the story states that they feel the immediacy of their trauma. It's at home when they're alone, and when they're in each other's presence.
Oh,
These are we have this whole catalog of patients. The kid with the kidney stones, the old lady who refused to be helped onto the kidney stone machine, the
man who touched her knee,
destroyed body that had to be lifted down carefully from the ambulance. But the only 2 patients who don't have nurses to attend them are the 2 main characters.
That's interesting.
And they're trying to help each other, and they are sick people with no doctor. And their love is rooted in this. Their love is rooted in their desire to help one another as they help themselves, which is what love is. Love is the selfish sharing of everything you have, isn't it? With someone who will accept it, who can accept it, who won't reject you. And it's just, and I don't think this is the greatest thing about the story for me. In the same way that Rocky 1 was such a wonderful movie. Remember Rocky 1?
I do.
You know why Rocky 1 was so damn great?
What?
There were so many things that contributed to it, but the main thing, Rocky lost.
Yeah.
But he won. Rocky, Adrian, I made it because here was a bum, a leg breaker who didn't even like breaking legs, who became a contender, who lived up to his potential. He won even as he failed, right? It's not a movie about boxing. It's a movie about, it's a Bildungsroman of a bum becoming a man who his wife could love fully, and who could fully love his wife because he knew he had gotten this bug out of the system, as it were. He realized he was a man at the end of it. And the other 4 movies afterward, were kind of almost a self-aware Rocky franchise. It's different. But in this short story, I don't think their love actually works out. But it's not supposed to. I didn't see any. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see any evidence that it survived beyond that motel room encounter. That's not the point.
No, it's not.
The point is they found each other, and they could, as it were, be honest with one another in a world that didn't care what they thought, that didn't care what they'd gone through. Did you punch in? Did you hook up that IV? Did you bring in the patient? That's all the world cares about. But they care about each other more.
One of my favorite lines from the piece, and it stuck with me, was the dead only have names.
Yeah, only the dead have names.
Yeah, and I thought that was really interesting because, just from a writing standpoint, the reader, the journalist, the writer doesn't even tell you their names. Really, he reveals it in such an interesting. Only when he has to say their names, and then when he says their names, they each have their own section. There's one Marlon, and then there's one Gracie underneath. Both of them are an entire sentence. This guy is a craftsman, David. But that sentence stayed with me because these 2, they're still alive. And being alive means they don't have a name. They don't have identities. They're just kind of there. But they have identities to each other in a way. They have, because they can share their trauma together. Maybe I'm not being as analytical as I should about that, but I just love that idea, and it just permeated through the whole thing for me. The whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's such a lonely story.
Oh, it
And
is. It is.
I do love stories like this that are about a moment. This feels like a moment,
Oh yeah, the climax is in that
the climax.
motel room. Yes, the climax is an actual climax. Yeah, sexual climax, right? Yeah. And they remember the names of the dead because they themselves are haunted.
Mm-hmm.
To be traumatized is to be haunted. You carry the ghost. You carry ghosts inside of you.
Well, when
You carry dead.
the,
You
this,
carry most of all. This is the worst thing about trauma. You carry the ghost of who you could have been. And you can never be inside of you. You can never be naive anymore. You can never believe in yourself blindly like the successful do. You can never do that because you know how bad life can get. You know how it can all change in a minute, and you did nothing to deserve it.
That's a
And
really good point. Just like
oh
them,
yeah,
they move
the greatest
around
ghost you
without them.
carry around beside you is yourself.
Yeah.
When you're traumatized, that's why they remember the dead so much, because they themselves are haunted. I think. I don't know. I could be talking out of my ass, but yeah, it's a wonderful short story, I think, and thank you for choosing it, Daryl. That was a great selection.
Oh, my pleasure. I thought it would
I
be
can't say I
interesting.
enjoyed reading it, but I certainly it's well done. It's a very well done short story, even in spite of probably because of its flaws, I would think.
Uh-huh.
They had New York, and again, maybe this is prejudicial, but I had faith in the story not only because I had to. It was something you and I were going to talk about, but also it's in the fucking New Yorker.
Yeah.
Not very shit bum stories very rarely get into the New Yorker. It's America's premier literary magazine and
But
among the premier in the world.
this story isn't the most not universal accessible. And when I saw it, I said, "Oh, yeah, no, we're going to talk about this one." And not as as overflowing with praise as we did for Demolition. But and I might have not have given it my whole attention if we weren't going to go over it, right? Like this is because it's so inaccessible, and I try to write accessibly, like that's just, and I find a great value in writing accessibly for and people who do that as well, because I mean isn't that what we're trying to do generally? But this, once you get past that, it is. Most of the New Yorker stories are accessible. They don't use like overly verbose language as one would think.
Oh, very rarely.
And even this narrator, how many times was the word "like" put in there, which I thought was really interesting.
Very, yeah. A relaxed diction, as it were. Yeah, almost like a conversational tone. Very few top shelf words. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very few tongue twisters.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that's been another episode of Boozin'. I'm Daryl.
Yeah, baby.
Good one.
Brett.
Good talk. And until next time, keep scribbling.